Hello and welcome back to another edition of the RotoRadar Daily Fantasy Sports First Look for Fanduel. We're approaching week 13 now, just coming off of an intense and injury-packed Thanksgiving as well as a Sunday main slate. It was a really intense main slate. We were sweating on both sites, and thankfully we got the edge out on Fanduel there with that late Geno Smith touchdown and some of the Devontae Adams fourth quarter action. Just barely missed on DraftKings with that Devontae Adams low usage and Josh Jacobs overtime touchdown run. But hey, can't win them all. But we're looking here to bounce back for a first look for FanDuel. We are sitting at 10-2 on the season if you include Thanksgiving. And let's go ahead and get started here as we dive in to week 13. Again, this is a first look. And so we were just talking as we were recording this on Twitch, and there's so many running back injuries that's going to flip this slate on its head, and we could very much see a situation like last week where we had anywhere from 5 to 7 running backs that were pure not home run plays necessarily, but you had some heavy hitters at the lower price tag range for the running back last week. We might get there this week, we'll see. But first, let's start at quarterback. Patrick Mahomes, 9K. Against Cincinnati in that revenge AFC Championship game. Jalen Hurts, 8,800 against Tennessee is a really, really strong matchup there. Justin Fields, don't really know if he's going to go with that shoulder AC joint injury. I would tend to lean towards no. Our good friends at Sports Injury Central were talking on their podcast last week, and the difference between an injury like Aaron Rodgers and an injury like Justin Fields, I know the Bears aren't technically out of or mathematically eliminated, but they're very close, as are the Packers. Although it's not 100% mathematically eliminated yet. They're two different situations, right? One quarterback is on the tail end of his career, while the other one is in a more precautionary early stage of his career. So they're going to take two different kinds of approaches with this, and I feel like Justin Fields has actually a really good chance to sit in this game, which is kind of outlined by what the spread is at the moment, which is the Packers -3. So we'll see what the final designation is on Justin Fields. I don't expect him to practice at all this week. Maybe we even get him ruled out towards Wednesday or Thursday. Make the clear quarterback decision, as you know that was a mess on last Sunday, like right before kickoff. So we'll see what the Bears do there. Joe Burrow against against Kansas City. I like the spot a lot more for Burrow if we get a decision on Jamar Chase, which we'll get to here when we get to the wide receiver position. But he seemed like he was good enough to go last week and then just didn't get cleared in time for Tennessee, or activated, I should say. I feel like he'd want to get up for this game, and if those of you who remember, I'm not saying he's at full strength here because he's not, but he absolutely dominated in that Kansas City matchup, and I expect there to be fireworks in that game as well. So I do think that Jamar Chase does elevate Joe Burrow's floor here, which I kind of expected a little bit more from him last week, but we didn't necessarily get there all the way. Lamar Jackson finally was able to kind of get things going there. He did get bailed out a little bit by that last drive and the potential field goal game-winning drive. Scored like 10 fantasy points in like a span of 3 minutes, which Lamar can do, but it really hasn't shown that he can do it this season. So I'm really hesitant to go back there against the Denver defense that has been one of the best in the league. Justin Herbert against Las Vegas is the first guy that really stands out here. Again, I like Jalen Hurts a lot, but when you look at 8,800 versus 8,100 on FanDuel, I think Hurts is probably as far, like he's the number one guy if I want to pay up all the way. But in terms of saving some money, I think you can look at Justin Herbert here at 8,100. He finally was able to get that ceiling type performance that we want from him. 28 FanDuel points, 47 passing attempts against Arizona. Now Arizona is a pass funnel, but I expect that this game against Las Vegas, like we've seen every other Vegas game it seems do, just absolutely shoot out here. And I feel like the secondary of the Raiders is just as porous as it gets. So I think that Justin Herbert should have a monster day, and he is definitely in the range of what our first look quarterback should be. Deshaun Watson, not going to spend too much time here at this one because our cover boy is actually Nick Chubb here, who we'll get to soon. But Watson should get the start here. I expect there to be as full ramp up as possible. But in the event of them potentially warming him up, that should give you a little bit less on the pass attempt side, more on the run production from Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. So I'm going to be off of Deshaun Watson. We'll talk about him later in the tournament podcast and tournament content that we have for you guys. But right now, as a first look, no reason to go there. Every other game here doesn't really stand out too much. I mean, Trevor Lawrence against Detroit is a streamer matchup. That's going to be nice. Maybe we focus more on that on DraftKings. But 7,500 for a potential 250 and 2 or 250 and 3 from Trevor can get the job done. However, I feel like I would just pay up a little bit more to get more of a higher floor from Justin Herbert. So I'm probably off of Trevor Lawrence, and some of the turnover stuff still kind of scares me a little bit. But I do think that he had one of those, he had the Trevor Lawrence game that we've kind of been looking for against that Ravens team that actually almost blew the lead. So we'll see if they're able to do that here against Detroit, which is a really, really fun game, by the way. It's a total of like 51. So I think that game is going to be a great one to look at. Other than that, though, I mean, Derek Carr just hit 3 touchdowns for the first time in 2 calendar years, so there's no shot of me going there. I don't think this is going to necessarily be a scenario where we have to go down this far. Kenny Pickett's matchup against Atlanta is very good, but again, 6,700 isn't necessarily worth it. I don't think so. The one thing that I do want to point out, I was just going to look to see. I think that Aaron Rodgers plays, but just in the event that he doesn't, you have Jordan Love against the Bears at 6,100. However, the total is just so low here at 42.5 that I don't really have much cash game interest on Fanduel. And you want touchdowns, right? So, I mean, what's he going to get? 1, 2? I just don't know if it's worth paying or if it's worth going down any lower than Trevor Lawrence. So, right now, I think that the guys that I want to have interest in here, Mahomes, Burrow in the same game. Jalen Hurts against Tennessee, I like a lot. Tennessee's been known to be a pass funnel this season as they've been very good against the run, so I'm curious to see how they would handle a mobile quarterback like Jalen. But I think that your play here outside of Trevor Lawrence, who's 7,500, is going to be Justin Herbert. At 8,100, I like that price quite a bit for him, and the production should follow against the Las Vegas team that I think we see another shootout there. So I'm going to go Justin Herbert's way, and we'll talk about more of the pay-down options potentially on the DraftKings First Look tomorrow at the same time. So if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're on Twitch hanging out, we're going to be going live for the DraftKings First Look at 1 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. So plan to be here for that, and we can talk about that then. For the running back position, we have Nick Chubb, 9,600. I understand that that's a massive price tag for him, but he's just the best in the league when it comes to pure rushing. I understand that this is kind of iffy on FanDuel, but at 9,600, I think he's one of the best bets for 1 touchdown, if not 2, if not 3 touchdowns here in this spot against Houston. I know that there's this drama surrounding Deshaun Watson. They're going to make headlines about it, but I do think in all actuality that they are going to just run the ball with Nick Chubb and run the ball with Kareem Hunt, and that's how they're going to produce offense against Houston, who ranks dead last against this position for the last several seasons. So I don't think I have to say more here. I think Nick Chubb is an awesome play, and the only thing that's going to keep him and the rest of the industry off potentially is price, right? And 9,600 is a lot. I understand it's a ton of money on FanDuel for a running back that doesn't really catch passes. So I'm banking on you got to have 1 touchdown for Chubb, otherwise he's not going to get the job done for you. So 2 touchdowns for Chubb is definitely on the horizon. 3 is definitely in play as well. But it's going to be really interesting to see if people go Nick Chubb's way or if they're going to go Josh Jacobs' way. I also think that that's probably like Austin Eckler's technically in play too, but I think that just given the fact that we have Herbert, we don't necessarily have to go that direction. But love Nick Chubb a lot. I think he's going to get 20 plus rushing attempts. I think he's going to get most of the inside the 5 work. He's going to be in a spot where he's favored by quite a bit. They're up. Cleveland is a 7-point favorite here in the spot on the road. They're playing in a dome, and Houston's run defense is atrocious. So I think that the spot couldn't be nicer for Nick Chubb. As far as other guys, though, I think that we need to take a look at some of where I believe is more of the injured range. You do have Joe Mixon, who's dealing with concussion protocol. If Samaje Perine is the lead guy again, I do have my worries a little bit. Like, he did get in the end zone. He had a nice game compared to guys like Michael Carter or Jeff Wilson, who didn't necessarily get all the way there last week. But I do have my reservations about whatever's going on with this running back position in Cincinnati. I think that I want to try to get as many pieces of this game as I can, but considering where these teams are at and we know what the prices of them, like where they exist already, it may be tougher than people think to try to get some of those Kansas City and Bengals pieces in cash games. Now, going to try to do our best to get there, but in this first look, if I don't end up going that direction, know that I still have interest in that spot. Christian McCaffrey is technically day-to-day with this knee injury that he has. I would need to look at it more here with our good friends at Sports Injury Central, but I do feel like he's going to play through most of this stuff. You're probably not going to see him practice too much this week, but Elijah Mitchell going down for like 6 to 8 weeks is not ideal for what the Niners want to do. And Deebo Samuel is already kind of banged up too. So I understand that the last 2-3 weeks for Christian McCaffrey have kind of sunk his price. And now we get to see a spot where he should be not fully featured necessarily, but I do expect closer to the 20 touch mark. And if you get McCaffrey at 20 touches in this offense at 8,200, it's a lot that can go right for you. So I think that just because he hasn't scored in 2 weeks doesn't mean that you need to freak out about anything, but it's weird to see him at 8,200. I will say that. So I think that this is a fine play. Will I be going there in the first look? I don't know if we're going to have enough money to go there. So let's go ahead and move on, and maybe we'll discuss and loop back on Christian as we move along here. I think one of the first things we need to look at is how healthy is Travis Etienne. He's dealing with this foot sprain. I don't really know what we should do at this spot here. I know that the reports yesterday said, Peterson could have put Etienne back in, but they chose to not do that, and they chose to kind of let him just have the rest of the day off to prevent further injury. That kind of worries me. Like 8K, if I'm going to go one way or the other, I mean, like McCaffrey's matchup is worse, but I feel a little bit stronger about that than I do Etienne against the Detroit Lions. But if Etienne is good to go and we have little to no news of a setback or whatever, man, it's tough to not like him at 8K against Detroit. I know that they got Jermichael Hasty and a few other guys involved last week, but I think it's clearly Travis Etienne's role. This injury, though, is something to monitor, and that's why I'm not able to click his name right now. But by the time Sunday comes around and we get a full week of practice reports under our belts, maybe I could find a way to get to Etienne here. But again, these running back injuries are the story of the Week 13 slate. So we'll see how that goes there. Jamal Williams in this Jacksonville spot is good. I'm hesitant to click Aaron Jones' name against Chicago. If Jordan Love is in, I think that kind of lowers the floor of everybody, but it could present more running opportunities for Aaron Jones. 7,400 is a nice price tag. I do worry about it a little bit. Aaron Rodgers being hurt and playing through this injury is somewhat concerning as well. Let's keep going, though, see if we can find anything. I would like to get at least one more running back, and we can talk about flex plays when we get there. But Najee Harris dealing with an abdomen injury. If he were to miss, then Benny Snell is a fantastic play. Maybe we can discuss him a little bit later down the line here. But the abdomen injury kept him out last night, and it's a 6-day turnaround, so I'm a little bit hesitant to talk about Najee Harris. And then from there, it kind of gets pretty ugly, right? Like, you don't want anything here. You don't really want A.J. Dillon. You don't really want Jeff Wilson, Gus Edwards, tough matchups. Brian Robinson, tough matchup. Dameon Pierce is pretty interesting, but again, I don't really want two running backs in the same game. We've really seen Dameon Pierce's price tag go down with the elevation of Kyle Allen to kind of take over quarterback duties there. If ETN were to miss, Jermichael Hasty at 6,500 is a very, very clear shoe-in play early in the week. Trying to find some other spots that we can take a look at. I mean, I can't. As much as I love Cam Akers' price and what he was supposed to do for everybody in fantasy this year, I can't find myself doing this on a first look. So I'm probably out on most things. So we're gonna have to loop back. Maybe we get a situation where Michael Carter's out, and so Zonovan Knight could be in play. Kareem Hunt has a nice GPP swerve off of Nick Chubb, makes a lot of sense. The guys that I want to talk about here potentially are these Las Vegas running backs. Like maybe we get a shot at seeing where Amir Abdullah and Zamir White kind of shape up here. I'm not sure. It's a lot of question marks, right? It's kind of what it is. So I know we're doing this on Tuesday, and so for those of you watching back on Tuesday or watching on YouTube, this is so early in the week. So what we're going to do is we're going to just pick the guys that are in really good spots and then just monitor what they have injury-wise. So let's go ahead and select Travis Etienne, and then let's see if we can just jam Aaron. Well, maybe I'll hold off, but Aaron Jones would have been my next option there. Wide receiver. Tyreek Hill has an undisclosed injury. This is huge for this game. I do think that he's good to go. There hasn't been anything really saying that he hasn't had anything crazy. He did exit early, and that's mostly because they were up by 30 points. So I don't think there's much to worry about, and I don't think that Miami's going to be able to run the ball effectively in this spot. So we should see the Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle spot really be a priority of focus here, where it hasn't had to have been the last 2 weeks for Miami, considering the awesome matchups they've been in the run game. Jamar Chase, it's really tough to look at him and say, I feel comfortable spending $8,900 on this guy, considering we have no idea how healthy he is. Great tournament play. I think it's a really solid spot, so keep an eye on that there. I think when we go and talk about some of these other guys, though, I worry a little bit why Devontae Adams wasn't targeted, and it's mostly because of the spot that Josh Jacobs had. Still, he ended up with 11 targets. A lot of that was in the second half, and you would have expected more. So I think that we can go back to the well on Devontae Adams against this spot for the Chargers. T. Higgins, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown. These are the guys that I really want to focus on for the first look here. You had T. Higgins' absolute alpha play last week against Tennessee. I think that he can be a huge benefit regardless if Chase is in or out. I think that if Chase is in, that gives the Kansas City defense a little bit more to worry about, and maybe we can see a couple additional spots open for T. Higgins there. But if Jamar Chase is out, then it's a clear Higgins week again, and his price tag did not move from the Sunday performance. A.J. Brown, 8,100 against Tennessee. It's the not return home matchup, but Philadelphia gets to host Tennessee, his former team, and they have just a ravaged secondary. Like they got absolutely torched through the air against that Bengals team last week, even though the game was a slogfest until the third quarter. So I do think A.J. Brown presents tremendous opportunity here, and we shouldn't have to worry about that injury anymore that he got kind of pulled out in the last primetime game. So Amon-Ra St. Brown had an awesome Thanksgiving. He's too underpriced for what he's going to bring to the table here in this Jacksonville matchup. I do want to have one of these three guys in my lineups, and considering that we have Chubb and Justin Herbert, I feel like I'm only able to get one of these guys. So I'm probably only going to choose one, but I do think that A.J. Brown, T. Higgins, Amon-Ra St. Brown are all fantastic plays for the first look. Waddle, nice tournament play. I think that Amari Cooper's interesting, but I never like to target him in road games. Keenan Allen, 7,700 is a little bit too high priced for my liking. I know he scored a touchdown last week, but I'm just not into the spot this week against Vegas, even though it's a very nice matchup. So we'll monitor that situation. It would be a nice quarterback stacking situation, but I don't know if I can get there just yet. And then from there, I think Christian Kirk makes a lot of sense, but I don't want to play him in the same build as Travis Etienne. And you got some of these other guys here where they're just kind of middling plays in a 7,000 to 7,500 kind of range there. Juju Smith-Schuster is a little bit too expensive for my liking here at 6,900. You have Devontae Smith at 6,800. Again, like some of these guys are really good plays, but they're just not good enough. Where I do want to target, though, is potentially a guy like Garrett Wilson sitting at 6,600. I think that he was a guy that was at 6K last week and obviously scored 2 touchdowns, had an incredible target share, finished the day with 23.9 Fanduel points, and you could have said that he should have been a little bit more efficient with those targets. But maybe he's got something going with Mike White here. And in order for the Jets to win, they're going to have to be efficient in the passing game. As of right now, they are 3-point underdogs going into Minnesota. So dome game. Don't have to worry about weather. I know it was pouring in the game last week, so maybe those targets turn into a little bit more efficient outcomes. So I like Garrett Wilson quite a bit, and I would like to roster him at 6,600. So we'll start there, and then I know we have to save some money, which we'll probably end up doing at tight end, or maybe we punt down to another RB2. I think that we need to look at Christian Watson at 6,500. I understand that some of these spots have been he's been overperforming relevant to his target share, right? Like I think that the big playability is always there, but I don't necessarily know if we should expect this kind of production. 6 touchdowns over the past 3 weeks is insane, but I think that this spot against the Bears, no matter who the quarterback is, should be in a spot where we can maybe make some things happen. So I think Christian Watson is certainly in play here. I think Zay Jones also is a guy that we can look at a guy that was just extremely efficient in the targets that he got as well. 14, he was about to score that game-winning touchdown, and that ended up going to, it ended up not going his way there. But I do think that 24 targets over the last 2 weeks is extremely nice for Zay Jones, and against the Detroit Lions, I think we're going to end up clicking his name. So what we'll end up doing is we'll end up going back and removing Travis Etienne to create a little bit more of a fluid situation there. I'm going to end up putting in Aaron Jones so that this kind of, because it would have either gone Etienne, Christian Watson, or Aaron Jones, Zay Jones. So glad that we were able to get at least one guy from each team in that spot. And then as we move forward here, we're going to have to find ways to save a little bit of money, because while we're going a little bit fair and balanced, Nick Chubb's price tag definitely holds things down. And that's why I kind of said, maybe over the course of the week, everybody will know that Nick Chubb is a great play, but people will forget or don't want to go there because his price tag is so high. And it kind of restricts what you're able to do with the rest of your build. So I do think that looking down a little bit lower in this range here, we may be able to scoop up something that can help us out. And I think that I'm looking at Treylon Burks potentially. I am looking at Drake London potentially. I know that the Falcons don't necessarily throw the ball more than like 25 times, right? But at some point, this dude's got to turn things around, right? I mean, maybe we all can hope. We should look at some of these Chicago options, although I do worry about what their upside is actually going to be with a spot where we probably don't have Justin Fields. Let's see. Yeah, I'm having kind of a hard time finding a third wide receiver that I like. So again, I think this position is going to come down to who you can pay up in the AK range for, and what kind of running backs that we get injury news from. Because right now, early week, it's getting a little bit tough to make builds right off the bat. I guess I would we can just put George Pickens in here right now after the game that he had on Monday Night Football. He's a tad bit underpriced compared to where I would expect him to be against an Atlanta secondary that they should have no problem passing on. So we'll go with George Pickens as of right now. But I do like the range of T. Higgins and those guys up in the AK range there. Tight end, I know we're going to have Travis Kelce 8,400. That's not going to be possible for this build in cash. It's probably not going to be possible in cash in general, unless you were to get off of and 2 running backs that are above 7K and play all guys in the 6K range, which could happen if we get enough injury news. Mark Andrews against Denver, no thank you. TJ Hawkinson in this game is very intriguing. I think George Kittle against Miami is certainly something we can take a look at. Then you get to start in this range here where I think Freiermuth makes a lot of sense. David Njoku against Houston makes a lot of sense. Foster Moreau or Gerald Everett, either one in this game, make a ton of sense. So I think we're going to end up going that direction. I don't trust Tyler Higbee anymore with what they got going on. I believe that Matthew Stafford's probably not going to play anymore this year, so I'm off of those spots. And if we're already going to be, we already kind of have 2 really, really good plays, so why are we going to dumpster dive in here just without, I think Evan Ingram's probably the only dumpster dive option down here, and I don't really want 2 Jacksonville pass catchers against Detroit necessarily. So let's go with Gerald Everett. I know that he did all right. He caught the 2-point conversion in the last game. You would have expected more targets from him, but again, he was coming back from a first game that he missed week 11. So I do think that there's upside here, and I think that if we're not going to go with the Ecklers and the Keenan Allens of the world, then I think that Gerald Everett needs to be involved in this offense, and it's almost as good of a matchup as he had last week against Arizona. So I like Everett at 5,400 here. And then we also have a pass catcher with our quarterback, so I like that quite a bit. We have 2 spots, and one of them is the defense, so let's take care of that first, and then we kind of find out where we're at. I don't know as of right now if we're going to have as clear of a play as Kansas City was last week, and even that really didn't work out. It wasn't really a spot we went to on Fanduel because it was so expensive, but the Miami defense against Houston was the winner there. We ended up going with the Broncos, and that just didn't necessarily work out, but a lot of the field was there, so it didn't hurt too bad. I don't want anything above 4K, really, because I think we kind of have to prioritize a more expensive piece. So looking down here, we're going to have to try to look for pressure-related things. If we have the Bears going up against Jordan Love, then I have some interest in the Chicago defense at 3,200. Other things, I think the Chargers defense actually is somewhat in play here. I like what they're able to bring to the table pass rush wise. Nothing too much on this side of things. Obviously, the Cleveland Browns are going to be super expensive. Let's see. You can make cases for Jacksonville. I think you can make cases for Atlanta, but their defense really just has not shown up this year. So now we're getting into the 4K range, which is where I didn't really want to be. But maybe we'll end up punting at defense and calling it a day there. Yeah, because we're not going to be able to afford this. This is way too expensive for what we want to do for this build. So I'll probably end up going down to, let's call it the Chargers at 3,300. I think that there's enough to be done here to where they can get some pressure on Derek Carr and potentially force 1 or 2 turnovers in a really fast-paced environment and higher totaled game. So in the flex, we got 6,500 left. I think we're going to have to try to find one of these injury-riddled situations and go from there. I'm going to target a running back because I do think we need 3 running backs for this first build. And we'll go with, let's go with Jermichael Hasty. I think that 6,500, the dude makes a lot of sense. And I think that this is what a mini light version of ETN would have brought to the table. I would expect a little bit more in the rushing department, and the Lions should be able to bring that as well. 12 for 28 is not going to be a thing that gets the job done, and he got a lot of his work through that passing game in the second half. So I do think that Hasty can be in line for a RB1 role as long as ETN is limited or sits. So 6,500 there is not bad. So yeah, we have some interesting spots here. Obviously, I think that the first thing we learned this week is that Nick Chubb makes things a little bit too difficult. Not too difficult, but it definitely presents itself a challenge, because then now we're kind of focused to not play a wide receiver over 7K. I think that the tight end play is fine. I think Herbert is just fine as well. Maybe you use that extra $600 to get the Trevor Lawrence, possibly. But I think that the Chargers pay down defense is able to kind of get us more of a well-rounded build. So the mid-range of wide receivers, not bad. I would have liked to have gotten a little bit higher of a wide receiver 1. So I think maybe just for an example, I'll still use this as a build here, but if we're going to take Nick Chubb out, and let's say we replace George Pickens and get to one of these receivers that we really want, let's say we get a guy in the Lions side in Amon-Ra St. Brown, that gives us $8,300 to work with. I think that's a little bit more doable, and then you end up on a Christian McCaffrey play. So I think that some of these are interesting situations, but as a first look, it does feel like Nick Chubb is a little bit too expensive for a cash game build. Will people still force him in? Absolutely, and I would encourage that. But I also think we just need more time during the week to be able to figure out whether or not we are able to fit him in, and you're going to need some of those injuries to go the right direction in order for us to do that. So if Hasty is the RB1, if let's say that Josh Jacobs gets ruled out, let's say Joe Mixon misses again in that game, You notice that we don't have any Kansas City and Cincinnati exposure. I could have gone T. Higgins as well, but that again is another reason why it's always really tough to get Kansas City players in your builds for these first looks. So we'll end the stream here. Make sure to give a like and subscribe on YouTube, and we'll be back on Twitch as well for tomorrow's DraftKings first look. So keep an eye on the video there over on the YouTube. As always, my name is Jared Block. Good night.